All right, friends, welcome. It is our first class of web fundamentals. My name is Will. I'm going to be your instructor. Here, we're also joined by the wonderful Christina. We'll do a little bit of an introduction on myself. I've been with Coding Dojo for 3 years in and out, and I've done a few different things. I've been an instructor for this program. I've gone to data science. I've kind of led our cloud computing stuff when we partnered with Microsoft. I've been a developer and just a TA while I developed. So I've been in and out, but I love Coding Dojo because it allows people to learn a skill that has can kind of transfer them to a different part of life, right? If you are here because you're wanting to change your career, whether that's to make more money or to do something you're more interested in, that to me is the best thing because that's what happened to me, right? I was in nonprofit work and decided to make a switch on something that I thought would push me and something I was interested in. I'd never coded before, didn't know how to zip a file. So if that's you, you're going to be A-OK. Um, and loved it. Did some contract work, came back to be an instructor, left to go work at a couple different companies, was a TA, and then decided to come back because I love teaching. And it's been great. So that's a little bit about me. I've got I live in Seattle. My favorite food, I always say pizza, but honestly, now I'm like in my 30s and it gives me heartburn. So it's not ideal. So I've been loving like sushi and poke. Living in Seattle, fish is fresh. I grew up in New Mexico, so we didn't eat a lot of fish because it's a desert. But we did have the best chili. And if anybody's from Colorado and if you say that you have the best chili, honestly, that's tough because that is not correct. There's a big feud between Colorado and New Mexico about who has the best green chili, but here we are. Um, New Mexico's the best. Hatch. It's called Hatch Chili because it's a set. That's a town. So like, come on. Um, I have two wonderful dogs and a wonderful wife who is in law school. Now, I do say this just to kind of let you guys know. There might be a time, and hopefully it doesn't happen. It has happened before. Hopefully it doesn't. But I've got two wonderful pups. This one is Marley. She is sweet and goofy. My wife found her at a gas station when she was way too young. A guy was giving out puppies, and she was like, "You should not be having her, sir." So then she grabbed her, and well, didn't grab her. He gave her to her. It's not like she stole her. She's great, but she has epilepsy, and so there might be times, and it has happened during class. I just kind of let you guys know on the first one. She sits upstairs in my office with me, and if I just say, "Oh, I gotta go," that means she's having a seizure. And if she does, it is a-okay. She's gonna be fine. It usually takes about 2 to 5 minutes. So if I do that, I will kind of just mute, and then I will kind of go off camera real fast, handle her seizure, and then in about 2 to 5 minutes, I'll be back. So if that ever happens, you know, I'll try to stop the recording and stuff. But if that ever happens, just know that I'll be back within about 5 minutes. She's just having a little seizure. She's okay. If she has a seizure, we give her medication. We have plenty of doctors and stuff. But just know that she sometimes has that. So if I ever am like, "Oh, I gotta go," then that's what I'm doing. Um, I have another one named Charlie, who is the love of my life. He is my favorite dog. I don't know why it's so big, but that's him. He's a Labradoodle. My wife and I got him right when we got married. I had a rule that if we got a second dog, it could not shed. And I do not know why this is so large. It's kind of concerning. Makes him look way more dramatic. But I had a rule that if we got a dog, it couldn't shed. So she told me, let's get a Labradoodle. And turns
Seriously?
out there's different variations of Labradoodle. And so
Wow.
I just happened to get the one that does shed. It's an F1. So, but he's the best. He's the sweetest dog in the world. Yeah, it's a little bit about me. Christina, if you maybe want to share a little bit about yourself. Sorry to put you on the spot. I meant to tell you earlier in our meeting, but if you want to share a little bit about yourself, that'd be awesome.
That's all right. So I'm Christina. I like coding a little bit too much. I've been back and forth from coding and psychology for a while. I was in the army for a little bit and then I bartended a little bit after that. And I got my associates in psychology shortly after that. And I think the thing that brought me back to coding was COVID. I wanted to help small businesses since I saw that the ones with tech presence had a little bit better outcomes. That's what brought me back, and I've loved it ever since. I stayed here. I went through and went through all three stacks, fell in love with it, came back here to work and really enjoy it. So as you guys go through, I do say the thing that helped me grow the most was group work, even though I'm super antisocial. So go ahead and I challenge you guys all to at least message one other person because that's the thing that's going to get you through this. Just having people to even code with or alongside to push you and get you through it, or even to just go over the basics that maybe you understand a little bit better and help someone else out. It helps you reinforce it. So go for it. And if Will is ever super busy, go ahead and DM me too, and I'll see if I am not as busy as him.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Um, Great. So that's us. Obviously, if you have any questions on life after this, or, maybe we're not going to be like, I won't be your instructor next one, um, like the next stack. So if you ever have questions, please know that I have an open door, and I would assume so does Christina. Just anything you guys need. We are here to help you even post this stack. Okay. I'm going to start every class. And I know this is our first one, so we're just getting to know each other, but I'm going to start every class with some housekeeping. This is a way that I can just always remind you kind of what's going on, what you need to do, just being in your ear, to kind of make sure that you are kind of aware of what's going on. You're going to have 2 discussion questions due Sunday. Now, I know that a couple of you guys are running into an issue, which is very peculiar because, transparently, I was hoping everybody would, if everybody's having an issue, that usually means it's user error and it's my fault, right? But we're running into a couple of you guys are being able to see the discussion questions. A couple of you are not. On our end, it looks like everything is open and working. So I'm digging into it. Obviously, I will give an extension for anybody who has been impacted by this, but please make sure you send an email to myself and Christina and just let us know, hey, I'm not able to see the discussion questions. It looks like they're not open. Double checked, I triple checked. They are open. They've been opened. Again, some people are able to post discussion questions, so this is making me very confused. But those are still due Sunday unless you are running into an issue, then shoot me an email and we will be able to go from there. You also got 3 core assignments due Sunday. You might ask yourself, where can I find what core assignments are due? Well, we just in office hour did a whole walkthrough of all of our tools and everything we're going to learn. But just real quickly, you can look here on our class sheet. Everybody was emailed this. And I've also posted this in Discord. It's the first one and it's pinned up at top. So it's here in our Discord. If you're over wanting, you just go to this pinned right here. So you can find that doc exactly right there. But here you got your assignment checklist. And this is going to be any ones that are in the pink that say core. Those are your core assignments. Now, just as a reminder, you've got to submit 90% of your core assignments in order to be in compliance. Anything, we will every other week, we will do an official check-in. What that means is if you are above 90, you're 90% or higher, then you're great. Yep, you're in good status. Everything is great. If you are somewhere between 60% and 90%, we're going to say that you're falling behind. That just means that, hey, you're not in compliance, that if it ended today, you would not pass. And moving forward, because in order for you to move forward to your next stack, you do have to submit 90% of core assignments. Now, anything 59% and below, that puts you in that's puts you on probation. That means you are not compliant. Now, this is only for your official check-in, which happens every other week. Please know that is, you only get 3 of those. You get 3 probations for the entire coding dojo. So not just for this class, the entire coding dojo. So you don't want to do that. And if you get 3 probations, if you fall far behind, it's the same thing with discussion questions, then you can be up for dismissal. It means you're just not keeping up with your work and you can be up for dismissal. So please don't do that. At least be as close to 90% as possible. Again, this is with discussion questions as well. So if you just don't do discussion questions, that becomes an issue. As a reminder, you need 90% of core assignments in order to, at least 90% or more. In order to move on, you need 80% of discussion questions completed, and those end. So please know that discussion questions are not open for all 4 weeks. Those end at the end of the week. Now, again, this first week is a little bit unique because we're having some issues, but so for example, this week right here, They end on the 16th. After the 16th, I cannot reopen them. This is a state compliant thing. If we're having an issue, I can submit a form. That's how we're going to be able to kind of get past it this first week. It's a state compliant issue. It becomes, I can't do anything for you. If you miss it, you miss it. There's no making up discussion questions. Unless you have like a really mitigating circumstance, then unfortunately I can't do anything for you. So please make sure you are keeping on top. These are all open now. So if you do have access to them, just go knock them out. Honestly, go do them all right now. That way you don't have to worry about it. That's 1/3 of, what is required for you to move forward. You have to have your discussion questions, your core assignments, and you have to have a passing belt exam in order to move forward to the stack. So once they open up, I would say dedicate 10 or 15 minutes, go knock out all discussion questions, and then you don't have to worry about it for this entire stack. Cool. We did go through a class overview and a walkthrough during office hour. Now, just so you know, especially if you're coming from programming basics, we are going to have class from 5 to 6 p.m. PDT or PST. I think it's PDT, Pacific time. From 4 to 5, we do reserve that as an office hour. Now, that does not mean that we have class. That is usually a time, and I do work really hard to kind of not teach during that time. Not because I don't want to teach more. And sometimes I will, usually maybe once a week, I'll have like a 30-minute kind of breakout on something, whether it's GitHub or the terminal, or just something I think you should learn, or something that you need to know we didn't quite get to in class. But I try to reserve that as time that you can come and have FaceTime with myself and Christina to answer any questions you have. So it really is a time, just like an office hour with a college, where you can walk in, you can get some help, get some questions. We can walk through it as a class. So that is from 4 to 5 p.m. If that is ever something that I think is important, like today's, we walked through some of this stuff, then it will be right here in office hour. So it'll be right here. It'll just be a hyperlink to that. And we'll see like it's a group activity, or I will describe what we talked about. If I talked more about functions, or if I talked more about CSS or display flex or something like that, that'll all be here. So this sheet is kind of your one-stop shop there. So please know that class really is from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific time. But if we need to, we will do some stuff during office hour. It's always going to be recorded if it's something important. And today we did do a class overview. I explained the sheet. I explained the tools that we're using. That'll all be, and it was recorded. That'll be here as a hyperlink as well. And I would say if you have questions, how do I navigate the platform? How do I navigate this sheet? What about Discord? Go watch this video first. And then after that, if you still have issues, then you can bring those up on Discord for us. Cool. My teaching style is one that I usually like to, I will teach on a topic. And then after that topic is done, I will sort of open it up for questions. Now, I will often say, put a 1 in the chat if this makes sense, put a 0 if it does not. If you don't feel comfortable, if everybody's putting 1s and you're at a 0, that's very okay. Just want you to know that sometimes there's going to be things that you understand that maybe some other people don't, and vice versa. If you don't feel comfortable putting, a 0.4 or 0, you're welcome to just message myself and just let me know, 0. If you can put a 0 in the main chat, that works just fine. And actually prefer that if you are bold enough to do that. I prefer that because oftentimes I can guarantee somebody else is feeling like a 0. And if they're only seeing 1s, they're like, oh, I'm the only one. Maybe coding's not for me. And so when they see that other people are sort of struggling, then they're like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one who doesn't get this, right? And so I'd prefer that. But if you can't, then feel free to put that in kind of a direct message to me in the chat. And and then if you are anything like below a 0.5, maybe it's just like, 0.5, and I just need to review. Great. But if you're anything like a 0.3, maybe put, what are you not understanding? Functions, or I'm not understanding how this all works, or something like that. That way I can go back and describe that. I do like to tell people that you need to tell me what you need. I will do a combination of theory. I will do, like today, we're going to talk a little bit of like theory with the request response cycle. I will try to use visualizations. I will code along with you. Sometimes I will have code built out. I do use a tool called GitHub Copilot that oftentimes will code for me. So I do a variation of things. If there is ever anything that works well for you, like in programming basics. I had somebody who would message me a couple times, which was super helpful, and saying, "Hey, can you slow down a little bit?" Absolutely. If I get a little bit ramped, I get excited to talk and to teach this stuff. Sometimes I can ramp up. Just messaging me, "Hey, slow down a little bit." That's super helpful. Or maybe if English is your first, or it's not your first language, and you need me to slow down, I'm happy to do that. If you need me to use more visualizations, or if there's anything that I can do that can enhance your learning, I will do my best to start incorporating those into our teachings and into our lectures. My goal is that I can help you understand coding and understand development. So if there's anything you need, now obviously I'm not going to tailor it everything to that, but I will definitely do everything I can to start incorporating that into our daily structure. So cool. Any questions on any of this housekeeping before we jump in and we get started? Anything that you guys need other than discussion questions not working fully? Okay. And obviously it goes without saying, but I do ask that when you guys come in, just make sure you're on mute. And that helps with everybody else's learning as well. Okay. Well, let's jump in. We've got quite a bit we want to talk about. Over the next 40 minutes, my goal is to be done within 45 minutes. Usually transparently, this lecture often takes about an hour and a half. But we did a lot of the early stuff in office hours, so I'm trying to mitigate and honor your time. Okay. So here we are. We are learning all about, HTML and web fundamentals, right? And so we are now diving in to a couple different, I would say, core structural understandings for whatever language you do, whether you were doing Java or you're doing JavaScript /MERN, or you're doing Python, or you end up learning C# or Node, or any language, you're going to have to understand HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And that's what we're going to learn in this entire course. This is the foundation of the internet. And I don't mean from like a technical perspective, but the way that we operate, the way that we see everything on the internet, the way that if I go to Google Chrome, which is where I'm at, and I'm seeing all of this is all written in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now there's some different things and packages and all that stuff that we don't need to worry about, but this is how we see and we use the internet. Back in the day, the internet started and it just had HTML and CSS, and it's what we called a static page. Anybody know what static page is? Anybody have any guesses on what static might mean? Yeah, Kari, it's just stayed the same, right? There was no sort of functionality behind that, right? It just, once you created it, and maybe if you guys back in the day were like myself and you remember MySpace, right? Everybody turned into a web developer when MySpace came, because you would like find this code and you put it in the back end, and then your page had like all these cool images, and it's really, you just found some CSS code and you posted it in there and it rocked. But everything was just static, right? Yeah, exactly, Robert. It's just a page. There's no animation. There's no functionality. So if you clicked on something, didn't really do much for you. And then this little thing called JavaScript came in, and it was built in 6 days. So it's got some weird tendencies, but it was built in 6 days. And what it did is it created this ability for me to click on something and other things happen, for me to do all sorts of different, it's what we call like having a dynamic page, right? Where I can now, based off of this, I click this, and on click, it goes from light to dark and all these different things. It created, kind of gave some life to our pages. And so what we're going to start with is HTML. And this is a building blank. This is the framework for what we see on the internet and on a web page, which is exactly what we're focusing on right now. I'm not going to deal with this like back-end database stuff for this cohort, but we're going to understand web pages and what we are giving, what we call client side. So what the users are seeing. Great. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about, I have way too many of these open. I want to talk about HTML. And I want to talk about what we call, first and foremost, a request response cycle. Now, this is going to be an important thing for you to know. just to understand how the browser and developer how our browser and our code will work in the back end. And then it'll really come in handy when we get into our full stack application, but just wanted to introduce it to you first and foremost. So right now, let's say I'm on a computer. I am here, right? And I am going to go to ESPN.com. Great. I'm here on ESPN.com. I see that Shohei Ohtani, who is the best baseball player I've ever seen, is here. We've got some like ads. I love sneakers and shoes. So I've got some ads for shoes. I have all this information, right? And whenever I click on this, and maybe I want to go more to the MLB in the homepage, what I'm doing is when I click this, I am making a request to ESPN, right? And we're going to look at it here. It's what we call our request response cycle. So we're gonna talk about our user. We're often going to use the word client for that. Somebody makes a request. I click on MLB and I'm making a request to the server. Now this server is ESPN, right? It is however ESPN works when somebody clicks on this, and what this server has is some logic, right? This logic is saying, okay, when somebody clicks on this, this is where I want it to go, or this is what I want it to do. We're making a request to our computer or to their server, sorry. And then if everything works out a-okay, they give us a response, right? And they go, here you go, here's your thing. You can sort of think about it like if I'm going to annotate a little bit. If I am at a restaurant, right? And at this restaurant, I am saying, okay, here's me. I'm at this restaurant and I ask my server, hey, do you guys have mac and cheese? Right? I am making a request to my server. And you can sort of think about this as like your waiter, right? So request, call this client. I'm saying, hey, do you have this? And we're going to take this request and we're going to go check our backend. We're going to go check our backend. And our backend is going to say either, yes, I've got this. So back int. Either say, yes, I've got this. And then if that's the case, it will give us a response back. Or it might say, okay, you asked for a cocktail, right? We said, hey, do you have access to this, really expensive bourbon? And the back end might look and say, okay, I need to go ask the bar, do we have this? Right? And can anybody guess what this bar is? What would this be in our analogy? Yeah, exactly, Thomas. It's our database, right? And I'll use an analogy from an actual coding perspective here in a second. What we're going to say is, okay, their backend's going to look and say, oh, do we have this request? The database is going to give us a response back and say either, no, we don't have this, or yes, we do, and here it is, right? And then our backend delivers that message to our client. It says, yes, here is this bourbon that you asked for, or this mac and cheese that you requested, or unfortunately, sorry, sir, we don't have this. We can't operate it. From a technical side, you might think about it like Facebook. I love to use Facebook. I use Facebook on a lot, or I guess Meta or whatever they're called now, Threads. Where let's say that I wanted to add a friend. I see somebody from high school that I went to, or I see somebody that I went to high school with. I'm like, okay, I want to add them to my friends list, right? I will make a request to Facebook and say, hey, can you add this person to my friend? Well, in the database, it would have all of my friends, right? All of that's going to be stored as like a friends list. And so what it's going to do is it's going to have some sort of logic back here that says, okay, great. I'm going to take this person. I'm going to take this friend and let's send it to our database to add. And the database is going to say, okay, great. Friend has now been added. Give it back and say, hey, this is successful. Yep, we're good to go. Friend has been added. And the backend says, okay, great. I got a successful response back from my database. Let me give that to my client. And then what we quickly see is we say add friend and it goes, yep, cool. This is now your friend. What's really happening is at lightning speed, we are making a request. Backend is handling that request. It's doing something to the database. Database sends back a response, and then we see it very, 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 very fastly. This is what we call a request response cycle. Are there any questions, or can you guys put a 1 in the chat if this makes sense? Put a 0 if it does not, or message me or somewhere in between. Again, this is really going to come in handy when we get to our full-time, like our full stack, not full-time, sorry, our full stack applications, when we're actually building out a backend and a database. We're right now only going to focus on this part for this class. So Thomas, yeah, fairly basically, backend functions kind of as a middleman. Now, it doesn't always have to touch the database, right? There might be what we call an API, not to kind of get too out of the weeds, but there might be another tool that we're using, right? That we have to call in and get some information. So it's not always the database. The backend kind of acts as like the people at traffic, you know, like a traffic stop, and they're directing traffic and they're saying, okay, you go here, you go here, you go here. And they're just making sure everything gets to where it needs. If it needs to do some logic on the back end, it can do that. But yeah, it's really just kind of directing traffic for all of these requests. Now it can get very, very, very intense on how many APIs and databases and all this stuff that you have, but this is a very simple explanation for a request response cycle to where our client makes a request. Our backend decides what to do with it, either does some logic, doesn't even need to touch the database and sends it back, or it says, oh, well, in order for me to do that, I need to go to the database. In the same way that if we ask our server to put in for this like expensive bourbon, they might go to the kitchen and say, do we have this? They go, I don't know, go ask the bar. It's like, okay, then they have to go to the bar. And then they come back with a response. Great question. Okay. So that's a request response cycle. And that is also all here as well. Oops, get out of annotation. All here. I will refer to this frequently, but it'll all be here. Okay. Now we are going to first start with HTML. Now, again, HTML is going to be the framework for what we view and how we set up things. The way you can think about HTML is this way. Let's say you're building a house. And if you guys have ever seen a house being built, you might have seen that at the beginning, it is just wood framing for this house, right? It is just like if you've ever been in a house that's being built, you can kind of see, okay, here might be the kitchen, here might be a room, here's some stairs here. It's just wood. It doesn't look like anything, but I can see the frame and the structure of this house, right? It looks like a house. It doesn't have walls. It doesn't have any of that. I can just see the framing of that. That's where HTML comes in. It is hypertext markup language. Now, HTML is not necessarily like if you say like, I'm an HTML developer, people are going to kind of scoff at you because HTML is not necessarily like a language like Python or Node is, though it is languages in the name. But it is the building blocks. Now, if we wanted it to start seeing how does it look, right? Our house, we have the frame, that's our HTML. Now we start putting our walls up and we paint the colors, right? And we decide what kind of flooring we have, and we decide what kind of molding we have and cabinets. What it looks like is what we call CSS. CSS is going to be the visualization on these building blocks, right? Now we're starting to say, okay, I knew that there were stairs here, but now I see the type of stairs or the railing type, or I see the walls, you know, texture and the colors and all of that stuff. That's CSS. Now, going on the last thing is JavaScript kicks in is what can your house do? Maybe you've got heated floors, which is awesome and pretty baller, right? Or maybe you've got some sort of smart house functionality. Like what can your house do? That's where JavaScript comes in. What can your web page do? We're only learning the building blocks now, but eventually we're going to get to a point where we build some HTML. We visualize it, we make it look nice, and then we add in JavaScript and some functionality. So yes, Lucas, JavaScript does have lots of function. HTML is the foundation, CSS visualization, JavaScript is functions. I would say maybe functionality would be the best way to say it because it's not always just functions, but we can use a lot of tools with JavaScript, but it's what is the functionality of your website. Great idea though. Okay. So again, this is the building blocks. And we're going to build our first HTML page. So if you guys are coding along with me, I'm in VS Code. You can use any text editor that you choose. I'm going to use VS Code. It is absolutely the most popular text editor on the market. I just saw a study, and I think it was like, I don't know, it's like 73% of all developers use it. It's like really, really, really high. But there's other ones if you like Atom or Sublime or whatever, up to you. I'm going to use VS Code. And what we're going to do is I've got a folder here called Lecture 1 that I'm going to add a new file. I'm going to call this index.html. Great. One thing to know when we're creating our files is we don't want to have any spaces. So if you have like index, like main index, you don't want to do like a space, like main space index.html. It's going to break it. If you have multiple words, if I wanted to do like a main index, I would say something like main index.html, or that's what we call snake case, or you could do something like main index.html. Anybody from programming basics remember what this is called? What this type is called? Yeah, exactly, Anthony. It's called camel case. Great job, guys. Great job, Thomas. So you want to make sure that you definitely do not have any spaces in here. It's going to cause lots of issues. So make sure you get rid of that. And then the end, this .html tells our browser what type of file it is reading. And so here we have our index.html. Now, one little trick is you can put a exclamation point. This is an Emmet abbreviation. Enter. And then immediately we get a whole bunch of information. Cool. And if you try to do the exclamation point and it doesn't show up, please let me know. I don't think it's a plugin. Christina, do you know if it's a plugin? I don't believe so. I think it's built in, right?
No, I think it's built in. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if you do the exclamation point, it'll build this here, but let's kind of look at what's going on. Here, we've got this doc type. So as our browser, each browser, so one thing to note is if you type an exclamation point, you have to press enter and then it will automatically go here. If that didn't build, then we can, if it's not built in, then maybe Christina, can you look into the extensions and see? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so it's built in. Sometimes you have to activate it. And if that's you and you need to activate it, just let us know, and then we can kind of help you with that. But what this is doing is this is declaring what type of HTML or what type of file that this is reading. Now, our web browser, when I go to Google Chrome, it uses something called a V8 engine to read and understand the actual files that you're giving it, right? And so what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, this is an HTML file. This is a building blocks file. So please, this is the format of the page. So it's telling it this is the type of page it is. Then we're saying that the HTML, the language is in English. We've got a character set of UTF-8. Now, this is a predetermined set of characters that is kind of the standard for how it operates and how it interprets. Remember, in programming basics, we talked all about the different ASCII characters, and we talked about how binary is like ones and zeros, and so it has to know what things are going on. UTF-8 is a way that we can, as the world kind of grows and becomes more technological, it's a way that we can solidify and make sure that my website works here and it works in other countries and other areas as well. So that's what this character set is. Like the characters that we're using is UTF-8. And you can hover over it and see this is our character encoding. So it's a whole bunch of stuff. If you want to know which ASCII characters are incompatible and all sorts of information, if you just hover over it, it'll tell you all this information here. And you might see a couple different things. Here's our head. We're going to talk about elements here in a second. This is what we call a tag type. And so here's of our head. Here's some meta, which means it's just metadata. So some other information that's good to know. When we get to this meta name viewport, it's beyond the scope of today, but this is how, when we want to create a dynamic web page, this is what it looks at. Basically, what this is doing is saying, hey, what kind of page or what kind of device is currently looking at this, right? And so it does this viewport check, right? And so when it's building out this HTML page, it's saying, is this on a phone? Is this on a tablet? Is this on a laptop, right? Or a computer or a TV or whatever you're doing. So that way it can move our code accordingly. We're going to get way into that in a little bit. Not today, but way into that. Now this title is what you see. So if I'm coming here and I see right here, MLB on ESPN, score, stats, and highlights, that's the title, right? So that's what we're able to see right here. Now I could have a little favicon is what it's called. If I wanted to have, this E for ESPN or a little coding dojo favicon. If I wanted to do that, I totally could. Not necessary, but totally could here. Okay. And that's the end of our head. So this is basically telling the browser, hey, here's some information you need in order to build this page. Now here is the body. Now what the body is going to do is it is going to be the meat. That's where all of our actual building, the portions of our house, the wood, the structure, everything is going to be built in the body. And then this HTML is just closing. This is enclosing everything here. So there's a couple things that we can see just right off the bat, right? We haven't looked at elements yet. We haven't looked at lists and tables and all that information, but we can see that we've got a few different types of tags. We've got what we call an opening tag and a closing tag. And notice that this head and this head, the second one has this slash right here. This is what we call a closing tag. So what the browser is thinking and doing is saying, okay, head, similar to whenever we had a function and we had the curly bracket and then the second curly bracket, and we're saying everything within this belongs to this function. Same sort of thing. We've got an opening tag and a closing tag. We're saying everything in between it belongs to this guy right here. Now notice there are a couple other tags like this meta. It's what we call a self-closing tag, meaning you don't have to have a closing portion of that. And there's a few, and just as you do this, the longer and the more you code, the more you'll kind of get familiar on which tags are self-closing, and then which tags do you need a closing tag for, and also some of your abbreviations and kind of auto close will help you there. It's a great extension called auto close. I think it's called an auto tag or auto close tag. We can look at that at the end. It'll automatically do that for you. So if you say, I need, whatever, it'll do that for you. Somebody noted that also the CSS and JavaScript go into the head. Yep, Robert, they can. The CSS, absolutely. Sometimes you might put the JavaScript in the body, but we'll get to that on week 2, I believe. But yeah, exactly. So lots of information comes here. When we're linking CSS, it's going to link within my head. Again, we're telling, hey, before you go and actually build out my house, here's the information, the type of wood we're doing, the size, all that information before you go build it. Cool. Now, within our HTML, we're going to have what we call our text elements. And so there's a whole great sort of breakdown from this where it talks about our opening tag and our closing tag here. So if you are, I would absolutely encourage you to walk through this and see, because what it does is it shows you that there's different types of common elements. One that's really common is your H1s, your H2s, your H3s. These are what we call our header tags. And so you've got an H1 through an H6 based on, here's the most important, second, third, fourth, fifth. And you can see that they get progressively smaller and smaller and smaller. And so here's a whole bunch of different types. We've got a P for a P tag, which is our paragraph. We've got hyperlinks, which is what we call an A tag or a hyperlink tag, or it's called an anchor tag, really. We can think about if you want to click on something in the same way that if I click on this might be an A tag, right? That I can click on it and it takes me somewhere. If I wanted to go watch fantasy baseball, or if I wanted to click on something, this is a hyperlink, right? I hover over it, I click it, and it takes me somewhere. That's what we call an anchor tag. And there's a whole bunch of different types if I wanted to style it. Now, I would say that there's some other styling we could do, but if you did want to style, like you wanted something to be italicized, you can use this MEM. It's open and close, and whatever you open and whatever in between my opening and closing tag will be italicized. And if you wanted something bolded, you just use strong, whatever's between the open and closing strong, that will be bolded. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do. So let's go ahead and build out. First and foremost, what you always want to do whenever you're building a new language is we're going to do hello world. So I'm going to build this out. So I'm going to say H1. Now, image abbreviation allows you just to type H1, and if you press enter, and it'll automatically do this for you, right? It'll do open and closing. You don't have to. If you wanted to do something like H1, I mean, mine auto closes, but I've got something to auto close it, but you can type it out too. Both of them work a-okay. And just like Robert said in chat, we're going to say hello world. Okay. So I've got this right here. Now I might want to see like, how do I see this? What do I do? I'm going to right click and I believe, let's see. Open a default browser. Okay. So we're able to see that. You might need an extension called default. Let's see. Yeah. So you might want to download this guy. It's called Open in Browser. You just go to your extensions right here and go to Open in Browser. Usually what I do whenever I'm doing an extension is I look and say, okay, how many times has it been downloaded? This is 8.1 million times. And so you could do that, or just like Robert saying, you do live server. I think we also talk about live server on the platform as well. And so you can do either one. Both will work a-okay, but we're able to now see our first ever code, right? We can see where it is. Now, please know that this is because the file is located on your computer, that it will actually open this up in a browser. And you can even see it's in my users, William Calhoun, desktop, coding dojo, instruction CD, July 23, web fund, week 1, lecture 1, index.html, right? Here's my entire path to this file. Now, oftentimes what people do, and I did it my first ever time, is I built a page and I copied this and I sent it to a friend and I said, dude, look what I just built. They're not going to have access to this because they don't have your code, right? And it's not going to open up in the same way. So just know that this is because this is what we call local. The file is currently local, so it's only going to open on your computer unless you have the code on another computer, then you can do it there. But just wanted to save you the embarrassing, hey, look at my page, look at my cool thing. And somebody's like, it doesn't run. You're a noob. Don't worry. People do it all the time. I did it my first time. It rocked. But now we can see here we've got our H1, right? It says hello world. Here up here, it says document. So let's go ahead and change that. So we'll go to our code. Cool. And I'm going to change this to Will's plus. I save it. Now, if I were to do this, you see this white dot, that is always an indication that it's not saved. Some people do have autosave. That can mess you up when you get to like Python and you have a server running, and it can kind of break your server. So I don't personally do autosave. But here, if you see the dot, I just hotkey, just Command S, save it. And then now, right now, it doesn't look like anything happened. So we might need to refresh. And now we see Will's class up here in my document. Cool. We have officially done our first HTML. If you are following along with me, you should be very excited because we are now coding. We're now seeing everything that's happening. There's a way that it depends on what browser you're on. But if you're on Google Chrome, you can right click right here, right? And then you might see this inspect. If you click this, now we can see what kind of code, and you can do this for any sort of website. We'll look at that here in a second, but you can see our code, right? We see that it's got this head, Will's class, body, hello world. This is the code we have, right? This is matching what this is saying. And so this is a great kind of resource. If I were to come here and I were to right click and say inspect, This is what the browser's reading. You can see all of this information, all the stuff. This is how the website is currently running with all these JavaScript scripts and all sorts of stuff. But it's a great kind of tool that you can see. And yes, Tuba, it is a lot of coding. One way that you can prank your friends is you can kind of come here and find this. And you could say, you could say something like, hey, oh, I think I accidentally clicked out of it, but you can edit this and you can kind of mess around with this and maybe make some fake headlines for your friends. You know, and you see like Will Rock. And so you might like create a fake headline and then just have fun with it. Mess around with the code. And this is a great way to learn other people's code and learn kind of see what's going on here. But it's not going to change anything the minute I refresh. It goes back to normal. Cool. So this is the foundation of HTML. We've got our head. We are declaring what type it is, and then our body. And this is really where the most of the work is going to come in. There are quite a few elements to go through. And so I would encourage, you guys can read, and I'm not going to go through every single one. The main ones we're going to deal with are going to be some P tags, and we're going to have lots of practice in this. So this is just kind of our first introduction. Keep diving in tomorrow, but we're going to deal with lots of paragraph tags. P tag is a paragraph tag. A tags, again, these are going to be our reference. So if I've got an A tag, and then where do I want to reference? www.google.com. And so that's my reference. So basically when it's clicked on, where do I want to send this person? And then what do I want it to view? So I'm going to say this is an A tag. Cool. So now if I come back, I saved it. I'm back to my page and I refresh. I now have an A tag. And I can right click, open link, a new tab. Oh. This is going to be access removed. Not sure why that happened. Not sure why it's not allowing me to take this. That's okay. I'm wondering if I need to do HTTP. Let's try that. There we go. I shouted HTTP and then that opened it up. But now you can see that it took me straight to Google, right? So that's cool. That's what an anchor tag will do, an A tag. We're going to use those a ton in what we're doing. And then we've got again, these emphasis and the strongs. That's a great thing to know. Really, these three are going to be the big hitters, right? Do you know how to do a header? Do you know a P tag? And do you know an A tag? That's for sort of our text elements, text-based things. Now we're going to build way more into kind of everything we're dealing with. And there's different tools, but these are going to be the big ones, your P tags, your A tags, your H tags. Secondly, we have this idea behind a list and a table. Now, if you've ever seen any sort of like nav bar, right? So even here, we've got a whole bunch of different things. This is just really a list, right? It's a whole bunch of different A tags. And so within development, we've got access to these lists and these tables. And so the way there's two kind of main types of lists. We've got what we call an unordered list, which is UL. What an unordered list is it starts with a UL and then it ends with a end tag of a closing tag of the UL. And then everything in between it rests within an LI. That means it is a list item, right? Now, the difference between a UL and an OL, they operate the same way, but the OL, the ordered list, really just means a numbered list. So if you want to have 1, 2, 3, 4, that means that this is an ordered list. And if you just wanted to have some sort of dots here, just kind of a non-numbered, but it's just a list of things similar to what we do with a nav bar, then you're going to have an unordered list, meaning that there's no order or necessarily anything with that. It's just a bunch of dots there. So that is something that you can do. Now there's shortcuts to building things. We can say something like a UL, and then we say LI times 4. Now what this is saying is I want to, this is an emit abbreviation. So instead of me saying UL and then LI, 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 I'm saying, hey, I want an unordered list. Let me do it again. I'll do an OL. And then within that, that's what this little caret does. Within that, I want a list item and I want 3 of them. And this will quickly make me 3 different list items. And I can say item 1. And whenever we do these, if you just press tab, it'll automatically take you to the middle of the LI. So you don't have to like click around. Item 2, unless you click something else, then it won't do it, but it's kind of auto-generated now. Item 3. And here I say UL1, 2, UL3, and we'll say UL4. And we'll see what this looks like. Cool. So now if I refresh this, cool. So I get my unordered list 1, 2, 3, 4, and now I have my ordered list with a number of 1, 2, and 3. Cool. Any questions so far? We've talked about text elements. We've got about 5-10 minutes left. We're going to talk about tables, and that's kind of it for the day. But any questions so far on any of this information? Is this making sense? Can you guys put a 1 in the chat if this is all making so much sense? Okay, perfect. Now, one thing I do want to bring up, and I'm glad I referred back to this, is in HTML, we have what we call a parent-child relationship. And this is a common thing just kind of throughout development. You'll see parent-child relationships kind of frequently. What that means is similar to kind of how a function works, but in this regard, this UL encases all of these LIs, right? All of these list items live within my UL. So can anybody guess if we're talking about a parent-child relationship, what do you think the parent of this would be? Of just this code right here. So I see the UL, so just this code right here, just these codes. I see some UL, I see body, I see a div. Yeah. So of just this code right here, the ones line 11 through 16, the parent is the UL and the child is the LI. Now, if we're talking about this code here, who is the parent? Yeah, the body, right? The body is the parent because everything lives within the body of the H1, the A tag, the unordered list, and the ordered list, and then the body. Now, one thing to note is that if we want to access the LI within the body, we must go through the UL, right? The LI is a child of the unordered list. The unordered list is a child of the bodies. Therefore, the LI, if we're thinking from like a lineage perspective, is the grandchild of body. Now, when we're dealing with these LIs, these are what we call siblings, which kind of makes sense, right? We've got a parent and we've got 4 children. So similar to how a family kind of typically operates. You've got a parent, And then if these are all 4 children, then they would be considered siblings. And so these are siblings to one another. And in this case right here, the H1, the A, the UL, and the OL are all siblings, right? Its parent is body within the UL, but it is a parent to the LI. Okay. Any questions on what I just talked about with this parent-child relationship? Anything that's not making sense? Could you just put a 1 in the chat if this is all crushing it? Okay. Perfect. I've got 2 more things I want to talk about, so I might go maybe 5 minutes over, but hopefully not too much. Tables is a way that if I wanted to view a table, I can. It has quite a few different nested pieces, which here we've got like a TR or children or grandchildren. So first off, we have our table, right? And I'll just actually copy this code and let's go to our code. Cool. We've got our table. That is the parent, right? And then within our table, we've got a table row, right? So the different rows, and let's actually view what this looks like first and foremost. This might make sense. So I have row 1, which is our movie. If we're looking at this, we've got movie, year, rating. That's kind of our header, right? Our row is the top. When we say TH, we're identifying that this is our table header. So it gives some different functionality, right? Our movie, our year, and our rating. That's our header. Then we've got another row, which is a TD, so like table data. So just like the information, right? So up and the matrix. And we can have a million rows if we wanted. We'd have a bunch of TRs, but you only have one header here. Right? We have just one of these THs. That gives us this header. So we will have tables. That's something we're going to get used to building out, especially whenever we get to our full stack application. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is our images and videos. Now we can add in images, and the way we do that is very similar to how we've always done it. But notice when we're dealing with an image, it's got a couple different things. I don't have a JPEG of a panda, but we'll put it here so we can actually view it and see it. Can anybody notice what's unique about this compared to all these other tags? What is unique about this image tag? Yeah, Dan. Notice that image tags are self-closing, right? They don't have a closing. So they are self-closing. Now, when we're talking about the functionality, what this image will look like is it's got 2 portions that it needs. One is the source. So basically what the browser is going to say is, okay, you want a picture, you want some sort of picture. Well, where can I find this picture? Where is it located? And that's the source, right? We're giving it this, this like source of here's where you can find it, whether it's hosted online or it's somewhere on our computer. We're saying, okay, this is where the image is. What this alt is saying is, hey, if this is broken or this doesn't work, what do I want to say in its place? So if I run this, we see panda pic, right? I don't have an image. It doesn't know what it is, couldn't find it. So at least it gives me this alternate text. This is also really important, and there's a huge movement for accessibility on the web. Having an alternate here is really big for screen readers. So people that are blind or wanting to see or needs to use some sort of screen reader from an accessibility standpoint. Having an alt here gives a better definition and helps with accessibility of code. So it's something you always want to do, always want to be accessible. You always want to make sure that you are building web pages and applications for everybody to use. So always make sure you add an alt with your image. Would it work if you didn't? Yep, it would work just fine. But then you just won't have any sort of definition. So if there's supposed to be an image and I don't know what it is, it can kind of be confusing. But you also want to make sure that you are providing an alt alt there so we can also help with accessibility as well. Okay, so we talked a ton about different elements, different things. The last thing I do want to talk about is whenever we are indenting, we're going to practice indentation, but you always want to make sure that you can indent your code to reflect the parent-child relationships. That is going to be something that is huge. So we don't want to do something like this, right? Where H3 is all the way over here, and then you got a P tag, and then it just looks gross. Really, it is for readability. It is for us to know, like, it is for readability. It is for another developer. This code is very challenging to read. Will it still operate the same way? It should, right? It doesn't really matter from a computer perspective, but we want to make sure our code looks correct and we can make sure that it makes sense. So if somebody else is reading it. Now, I would practice trying to understand parent-child sibling relationships. And so there's a couple different things that you can do for like fixed indentation. This is a great one to sort of fix it. If it's all like this, work on identifying parent-child relationships. And there's a whole bunch of things. And then tomorrow or this week, I'll show you a tool that will actually do it for you. Okay. We are 5 minutes over, so I'm gonna stop class there. Tomorrow, we are going to introduce CSS. We are going to talk about it in class tomorrow, looking at it, or sorry, in office hour. I'm going to talk a little bit about divs. I'm going to reserve maybe 20 minutes. I'm going to talk about divs and forms. So that way we can go through and you can have that. If you can't make it, that's a-okay. I will make sure that that is recorded for you. So that way you have access to it, but pretty self-explanatory. There's lots of stuff here. So please make sure you're going through the platform as well. It's going to give you a ton of different information. But I will make sure that tomorrow we talk a little bit about divs and a little bit about forms in our office hour, maybe the back half. So other than that, are there any questions on just what we've talked about today? I'll go through the chat, but is there any questions now as we can kind of come off? And if not, we will end the class here. I'm seeing Tuba, you're asking about when we go to the functions and information windows pops up. Can you tell us what extension? Are you talking about my inspect tool? Like when I right click on this, I just go to inspect. That's built into Google Chrome. So if that's what you're looking for, it's all built in. And lots of them. Oh, this guy. I'll have to look. Like if I hover over this. Or like this right here. I'll have to, I thought that was, I'll have to try to figure that out, but I thought that was, kind of built in. Christina, do you have anything? Do you know, is this just Emmet or?
Mine
any
was
idea?
kind of built in like Emmet too, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. If you hover over right now, Tuba, do you see this? Okay. So maybe tomorrow in office hour, we can get together and I can see what extensions you have because so Thomas says built in on theirs. Are you guys using VS Code? And do you have a file that is a .html? Okay. Yeah, maybe tomorrow in office hour, let's look at it and I'll look at tonight and see what I can get and see if there's maybe an extension that I accidentally have that kind of helps there. So, okay. Any other questions, friends? I'll stop the recording here.